I transformed a startup dream into a billion-dollar tech empire, yet tonight, I'm mopping the executive floor of the headquarters that bears my name. Vivian, my wife, believes I'm sealing a merger deal in Singapore, thousands of miles away. She doesn't realize I'm positioned just outside her corner office, cleaning supplies in hand, as she casually discusses how simple it was to drain my accounts without me noticing. Alexander Cole appears to possess it all, the power of a revolutionary CEO, a company reshaping entire industries, and what he's convinced is an ideal partnership with his wife, Vivian. But something shifts when his CFO quietly pulls him aside with troubling news: financial discrepancies bearing Vivian's digital signature. The numbers don't lie, but Alexander needs more than spreadsheets. He needs to see the reality behind the facade. He doesn't confront. He doesn't accuse. Instead, he vanishes from his own life. Within days, Alexander Cole ceases to exist in the public eye. In his place emerges Arthur, a stooped, gray-haired night janitor with weathered hands and a forgettable face. The transformation is complete, the invisible man cleaning the empire he built. This introduction establishes Alexander's central tension, his want, protecting the legacy and company he's poured his life into, versus his need, discovering whether any element of his carefully constructed world, his marriage, his inner circle, his trust, holds any truth. He's a man who built everything on data and metrics, now forced to navigate the messy, unpredictable realm of human deception. The question that haunts him as he picks up that first mop: what else has he been too blind to see? 3 weeks earlier, Richard Chen stood in my office doorway with the expression of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Alexander, we need to talk." Privately. My CFO had been with me since the garage days, when our biggest worry was meeting payroll for a team of 5. Now we managed 3,000 employees across 12 countries. Richard didn't do drama. If he looked worried, I should be terrified. He closed the door and slid a folder across my desk. Red tabs marked the damning pages. 2.3 million, he said quietly. Moved through 17 shell accounts over 8 months. The authorization codes trace back to executive-level credentials. I opened the folder. Transaction after transaction, each one small enough to avoid automated alerts, large enough to bleed us dry over time. Whoever designed this understood our systems intimately. Whose credentials? Richard's silence answered before his words could. Vivian's. My wife. The woman who'd stood beside me through every sleepless night, every failed pitch, every moment I doubted myself. The woman who had her own successful design firm and had never shown interest in my company's finances. That's impossible. Vivian barely knows our. Look at timestamp 0047. Richard pointed to a highlighted entry. That transaction was processed at 2:47 a.m. on March 9. You were in London. I checked the access logs. Someone physically logged in from your home office. The room felt smaller. Could it be a hack? Someone spoofing her? The biometric scanner confirmed her fingerprint, Alexander. 16 times. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. $2.3 million. Not enough to cripple us, but enough to suggest this was a test run. A proof of concept. Who else knows? Just us. I came to you first because, Richard paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I know what this means. And because the pattern suggests this isn't finished. I closed the folder, my mind already racing through possibilities, searching for innocent explanations that didn't exist. Vivian had biometric access because I'd given it to her years ago for emergencies. She'd never used it. Until now. Don't tell anyone, I said. Not security, not legal, no one. Alexander, we need to. No. I stood, looking out at the city skyline I'd conquered. If someone's stealing from me, I need to know who else is involved. And I need to know why. Richard gathered his folder. What are you going to do? I thought about confronting Vivian, demanding explanations, trusting the woman I'd married. Then I thought about those 16 fingerprint scans. 16 deliberate choices to betray me. I'm going to disappear, I said. And I'm going to watch what happens when everyone thinks I'm gone. The transformation began in a motel bathroom 40 miles from home. I'd told my assistant I was flying to Singapore for investor meetings. Booked the tickets, arranged the hotels, even had my luggage loaded onto the company jet. Then I'd slipped out a service exit and driven away in a rental car no one knew existed. Now I stared at my reflection, Alexander Cole, billionaire CEO, tech visionary, fool, and prepared to erase him. The stage makeup came first. Spirit gum aged my face with wrinkles. Gray powder streaked through my dark hair. Brown contact lenses replaced my distinctive blue eyes. But the real transformation required more than cosmetics. I'd hired a dialect coach off the books, paying cash for a crash course in East Texas dialect. Y'all and might could replaced my Stanford polished speech. I practiced the accent until it felt natural, until Alexander's voice disappeared into Arthur's drawl. The hardest part was my hands. CEOs have soft hands, smooth from expensive moisturizers and minimal manual labor. I spent 2 days sandpapering my palms, rubbing them raw, working calluses into the skin. Each abraded layer hurt, but pain was just another detail that had to be right. I bought Arthur's wardrobe at a thrift store, worn work pants, faded flannel shirts, steel-toed boots with scuffed leather. I practiced walking with a slight hunch, the posture of a man whose body ached from decades of hard labor. In the mirror, Alexander Cole vanished. Arthur Hayes looked back, 63 years old, divorced, working nights to supplement his Social Security. Invisible. Forgettable. Perfect. The final piece was the job application. Coltech was always hiring cleaning staff through a third-party contractor. I filled out the forms in Arthur's careful handwriting, listing fabricated references from defunct companies in Houston. No background check would flag a man who didn't exist. 2 days later, Arthur Hayes received his uniform and assignment, night shift, executive floor, Coltech headquarters. I pressed the blue work shirt and studied myself one last time. Somewhere underneath the disguise, Alexander Cole still existed. But he'd have to stay buried. Because Arthur had work to do. I thought about calling Vivian, hearing her voice, giving her one last chance to confess. Instead, I picked up my new employee badge and headed for the building I designed. It was time to see what happened when the king became the janitor. And when I became invisible, what would my wife reveal? The night supervisor barely glanced at my badge. Arthur Hayes. You're covering the executive floor. Bathrooms, conference rooms, offices. Trash out by midnight, floors mopped by 3 a.m. Don't touch anything on the desks, don't open any drawers, don't exist. Got it? Yes, ma'am. My Texas accent felt thick in my mouth. She handed me a key card and a supply cart. Stay out of people's way. These executives work late and they hate being reminded that real people have to clean up after them. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I'd always valued our service staff, that I knew their names, that I'd implemented generous wages and benefits. But Arthur Hayes wouldn't defend Alexander Cole. Arthur would nod and push his cart toward the elevator. The executive floor looked different at night. Without the urgent energy of meetings and deals, it felt like a stage after the performance ended. My corner office sat dark at the hallway's end, waiting for a CEO who would never return. I started with the bathrooms, the work humbling in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'd built this company on innovation and vision. Now I scrubbed toilets in the building that bore my name. Near midnight, voices echoed from the main conference room. I slowed my cart, approaching with my head down, making myself smaller. Marcus Reed stood at the head of the table, my deputy CEO, the man I promoted 6 months ago after his brilliant restructuring proposal. He was on his phone, laughing. "No, she's not worried. Alexander's in Singapore for another week. We've got time." My hands tightened on the mop handle. I kept my head down, pushing the cart closer. "The funds clear tomorrow," Marcus continued. "Then we move on phase 2. Trust me, by the time he figures out what happened, it'll be too late to." He noticed me and lowered his voice. "Hold on. Cleaning guys here." I felt his eyes scan past me, dismissing Arthur as irrelevant. I emptied the trash bin with practiced slowness, ears straining. "Yeah, I'm back," Marcus said, his voice quieter now. "Look, Vivian handled her part perfectly. The man built a security empire and never thought to check his own wife's access logs. It's almost sad. Vivian. My wife. Marcus. My deputy. Together. I kept moving, methodical and invisible, while my world collapsed. Marcus ended his call and walked past me without acknowledgement. To him, I was furniture. Something that cleaned and disappeared. I finished the floor in mechanical silence, my mind racing through every conversation, every dinner with Marcus and his wife Claire, every time I trusted him with company decisions. How long had this been planned? How many others were involved? At 3 a.m., I sat in a supply closet with my phone, reviewing the security app I designed years ago. As CEO, I had access to every camera, every access log, every digital footprint in the building. But Alexander couldn't access these systems now, not without alerting everyone that he was watching. I'd need to find another way. I pulled off my gray wig and stared at the monitoring screen. Vivian's access card had pinged the executive entrance 17 minutes ago. She was here, in the middle of the night, while I was supposedly 12 time zones away. Perhaps stories like this resonate because they reveal the truth about trust. If you've ever felt that quiet pull to understand someone's journey, to witness what happens when everything they've built faces collapse, then maybe you feel it too. Stay with me. I need you to see how deep this goes. I replaced the wig and gripped my mop. Time to see what my wife was doing in my building at 3 in the morning. Vivian's laughter carried through the executive floor like broken glass. I'd positioned myself in the hallway alcove outside the main conference room, organizing supplies with meticulous slowness. Through the partially open door, I could see her standing near the windows, phone pressed to her ear, silhouetted against the city lights. "Mother, I told you, it's handled." Her voice carried the same warm tone she'd used with me that morning before my supposed flight. Alexander's clueless. He actually believed I wanted to attend that tech summit in Tokyo. God, the man tracks algorithms but never thought to track his own wife. I felt something in my chest crack. Not surprise, I'd seen the evidence. But hearing her voice, so casual in its cruelty, made it real. The conference room door opened wider. Marcus entered, carrying 2 glasses and a wine bottle I recognized from my private collection. $4,000. A gift from a Japanese investor. Is that from his office? Vivian asked, accepting a glass. Where else? The man has excellent taste in wine. Shame he has terrible taste in people. They touched glasses. The sound echoed in the empty hallway. I adjusted my cart, moving slightly closer. Every instinct screamed at me to storm in, to confront them, to reclaim my dignity. But Arthur stayed silent, invisible, cleaning the baseboards with methodical precision. "How much is left?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair at the head of the table. "My chair. 300,000. I'll move it Thursday night when he's supposedly in his Singapore meetings. The final transfer triggers the account closure, and everything's untraceable." "You're sure about the security protocols?" Vivian smiled, and I saw something in that expression I'd never noticed before. Cold calculation beneath the warmth. "I've had biometric access for 6 years. Alexander gave it to me himself. Said he trusted me with everything." She laughed again. "Trusting people is his biggest weakness." Marcus leaned back, swirling his wine. "And after the money's clean? Then we move to phase 2. Project Takeover. Once Alexander's labeled as mentally unstable, missing meetings, erratic behavior, the whole breakdown narrative, the board will remove him. You step in as interim CEO, and I file for divorce citing his instability. The prenup has a morality clause, but it also has a mental fitness clause." My hand trembled on the mop handle. They weren't just stealing money. They were stealing everything. "The forensic accountant will notice the discrepancies eventually," Marcus said. "By then, it won't matter. You'll control the board, I'll have my settlement, and Alexander will be too busy defending himself against fraud allegations to notice who actually committed them." Marcus stood, moving closer to Vivian. "You're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant." "I know." She set down her wine glass. "I've been planning this since before we got married. You think I loved him? I loved what he could build. And now that it's built, I don't need the builder anymore." The words hit harder than any physical blow could. 8 years. Our entire marriage was a performance. Marcus's hand found the small of her back, drawing her closer. She turned into him, and they kissed with the familiarity of long practice. Not a new affair. Not a sudden betrayal. Something calculated and sustained. I backed away slowly, my cart's wheels silent on the carpet. I'd heard enough. More than enough. In the supply closet, I locked the door and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I navigated to the building's security system and checked the conference room cameras. The angle was perfect, capturing their faces, their words, everything. I started recording. For the next 20 minutes, I documented their entire conversation. The account numbers, the timeline, the board manipulation strategy. Marcus revealed investors he'd already corrupted with promises of profit. Vivian outlined the psychological evaluation she'd arranged, the doctor she'd paid to declare me unfit. They were thorough. They were careful. They were so confident in my absence that they never imagined I might be listening. When they finally left, Marcus's hand possessive on Vivian's waist, I remained in the supply closet until my breathing steadied. Arthur Hayes might be invisible. But he could see everything. And now I had proof. Marcus's desk drawers weren't locked, a telling oversight for a man orchestrating corporate treason. It was 4 a.m. The executive floor sat silent except for the building's ambient hum. I'd watched Marcus and Vivian leave together an hour ago, their laughter echoing down the hallway like mockery. Now I stood in his office, my janitor's uniform a perfect disguise for the crime I was committing. The file sat in his bottom drawer under expense reports and vendor contracts. Project Takeover was written across the tab in Marcus's precise handwriting. Inside, I found the blueprint for my destruction. Page 1, a timeline. 8 months of preparation, each milestone checked off with clinical precision. Vivian's credential compromise. Strategic board member cultivation. Financial irregularity creation. Media leak coordination. Page 2, Psychological warfare. Marcus had researched my mannerisms, my speech patterns, my behavioral tells. Notes in the margins detailed how to document my instability, recordings he'd edit, meetings he'd claim I'd missed, emails he'd fabricate. Page 3, the board votes. 12 members, each one annotated. 7 were marked green, Marcus's confirmed supporters. 3 were yellow, uncertain, requiring persuasion. 2 were red, Richard Chen and Patricia Moore, my CFO and head of operations. They'd never support the coup. Which meant Marcus had plans for them too. I photographed every page with my phone, my hand steady despite the fury building in my chest. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was systematic dismantling by people I'd trusted. The final page made me stop breathing. It was a draft press release, dated 2 weeks from now. Coltech CEO Alexander Cole steps down amid health concerns. The statement expressed gratitude for my visionary leadership, while noting my need to focus on personal wellness. Marcus Reed would serve as interim CEO, with full board support. They'd already written my obituary. I was returning the file when I noticed another document beneath it. An email thread between Marcus and someone named David Chen. Not my CFO Richard, someone else. The SEC audit clears next week. Once the forensic trail points to Alexander's accounts, he won't be able to defend himself. He'll either resign quietly or face federal fraud charges. They weren't just pushing me out. They were setting me up for prison. I photographed that too, then carefully returned everything to its precise position. Marcus might be arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. Any sign that someone had been through his desk would trigger lockdown. In the hallway, I resumed mopping, my mind cataloging everything I'd discovered. The scope of their betrayal went beyond marriage, beyond corporate theft. They'd weaponized my own company against me. But they'd made one critical error, they'd assumed Alexander Cole would react emotionally. That he'd confront them, expose himself, make the kind of desperate moves that would confirm their narrative of instability. They didn't account for Arthur Hayes. The invisible man. The one who cleaned their offices and listened to their plans and gathered evidence with the patience of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. I checked my phone. 73 photographs. 12 audio recordings. Security camera footage. Transaction logs. Everything documented, everything time-stamped, everything admissible. As I pushed my cart toward the service elevator, my reflection caught in the window glass. Beneath Arthur's gray hair and weathered face, Alexander Cole was still there, still calculating, still fighting. They wanted to take my company. Let them try. Because when the invisible man finally revealed himself, he'd have all the proof he needed to destroy them. The question was no longer whether I'd survive this betrayal. The question was whether they would. The jet lag was fictional, but I performed it perfectly. Sorry, love. The Singapore meetings went longer than expected. I set my luggage down in our foyer, Arthur's disguise safely hidden in a storage unit across town. I'm exhausted. Vivian appeared from the kitchen, her face arranged in wifely concern. She wore the cream cashmere sweater I'd bought her for Christmas, her hair pulled back in the style she knew I loved. Every detail calculated. You poor thing. Come here. She embraced me, and I felt nothing. Where warmth had once lived, only cold observation remained. I missed you, she murmured against my shoulder. The lie was so smooth I almost admired it. 5 nights ago, She'd been in Marcus's arms, laughing about how easy I was to deceive. Now she played the devoted wife with Oscar-worthy commitment. "Missed you too." I pulled back, studying her face. Looking for cracks in the performance. "How was your week?" "Quiet. I worked on the Bennett project mostly." "Oh, and I had lunch with Claire yesterday." Marcus's wife. Another lie. Claire was in Boston visiting her sister, I checked. "That's nice. How is she?" "Good. Busy with the gallery opening." Vivian moved to the kitchen, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "I'm making your favorite. Pasta carbonara." "You must be starving." I wasn't hungry. My stomach had been in knots since that first conversation with Richard. But Alexander Cole, returning from Singapore, would be grateful for his wife's attention. That sounds perfect. I sat at our kitchen island, watching her work. Her movements were practiced, efficient. She hummed while she cooked, occasionally glancing at me with soft smiles. The perfect domestic scene. "Marcus called yesterday," she said casually, her back to me. "Wanted to confirm the board meeting agenda for next week." My pulse quickened. "What about it?" "Oh, nothing important. Something about quarterly projections." I told him you'd follow up. She turned, holding a wooden spoon. "Unless there's something I should know." The question hung in the air, seemingly innocent. But I caught the calculation behind her eyes. Testing. Probing. Making sure I suspected nothing. Just the usual business. Marcus handles most of that anyway. He's good at his job. Vivian turned back to the stove. "You're lucky to have him." "Yes. Lucky." We ate dinner at the dining table, making small talk about weather and neighborhood gossip. She asked about Singapore, and I recited the fiction I'd prepared: meetings that never happened, investors I'd never met, deals that didn't exist. She believed every word. Why wouldn't she? I'd never lied to her before. "There's something I wanted to discuss," Vivian said, pushing pasta around her plate. "I've been thinking about us. About our future." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "Our future? I love you, Alexander. But sometimes I wonder if we've grown apart. Your work consumes you. I feel like I barely know you anymore." The setup. The groundwork for her divorce narrative. Planting doubts, establishing distance, creating the story that would justify her exit. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said carefully. "Work has been demanding, but you're my priority. You know that." "Do I?" Her eyes glistened with theatrical tears. "Sometimes I wonder if you'd even notice if I left." I reached across the table, taking her hand. Her fingers felt cold in mine. "I'd notice. I'd be devastated." She squeezed my hand, and I thought about that same hand typing authorization codes to steal millions. About those fingers trailing down Marcus's back 5 nights ago. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Promise me we'll always be honest with each other. No matter what." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. She sat across from me, lying about everything, and demanded honesty. "I promise," I said. "Always honest." She smiled, satisfied. The performance was complete. Later, in our bedroom, she fell asleep quickly, her breathing deep and peaceful. No guilt disturbed her rest. No conscience kept her awake. I lay beside her in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, and thought about the board meeting scheduled for next week. The emergency session Marcus had called. The coup they'd orchestrated while I was supposedly in Singapore. They thought I'd be surprised. Unprepared. Vulnerable. They had no idea Arthur Hayes had been documenting everything. In 2 days, I'd walk into that boardroom and show them exactly what happened when you betrayed Alexander Cole. But tonight, I let Vivian sleep peacefully. Let her believe her plan was working. The best performances always saved their final act for the audience who deserved it most. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. I arrived at 1:45, still wearing Arthur's janitor uniform. Security recognized my CEO badge despite the disguise. Their confusion was almost comical. "Mr. Cole." "Sir, we weren't expecting." "I know." I moved past them toward the executive elevator. "Don't announce me." The executive floor buzzed with nervous energy. Board members arrived in clusters, their expressions ranging from concern to guilty. I watched from the service hallway, still invisible in my uniform, cataloging who knew what. Marcus arrived at 1:50, his confidence palpable. He'd dressed for the occasion, navy suit, red power tie, shoes polished to mirrors. The uniform of a man about to become CEO. Vivian entered 2 minutes later through the private entrance. She wore black, appropriate for a funeral. My funeral. Through the boardroom windows, I watched them take their positions. Marcus at the head of the table, my chair, his chair now. Vivian in the gallery seats, perfectly positioned to watch her husband's destruction. Richard Chin caught my eye from across the hallway. I'd briefed him that morning, sharing everything I'd discovered. His face showed carefully controlled rage. At exactly 2 p.m., Marcus called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I'll get straight to the point. I'm calling for Alexander Cole's immediate removal as CEO, citing mental instability and financial malfeasance. I have evidence." I opened the boardroom door. The room went silent. 12 board members, Marcus, Vivian, all staring at the janitor who'd just interrupted their meeting. "Sorry I'm late," I said, my voice Alexander's now, not Arthur's. "Traffic was terrible." Vivian's face went white. Marcus actually stumbled backward, gripping the table. "Alexander. You're supposed to be in Singapore." "Yes, that was the plan." I walked to the presentation screen, pulling up the first file. Funny thing about Singapore. I never went. Instead, I spent the last 3 weeks working as a night janitor in my own building. Amazing what you can learn when people think you're invisible. I pressed play. The conference room security footage appeared on screen, Vivian and Marcus, wine glasses raised, discussing how easy it was to deceive me. Vivian's voice filled the room, trusting people is his biggest weakness. I paused the video. "You were right about that, Vivian. I did trust you. Both of you." Marcus found his voice. "This is a violation of privacy. You can't." "Can't what?" "Record conversations in my own building using security systems I designed." "Actually, I can. Employment Contracts Section 12, Paragraph 4. Everyone in this room signed it." I advanced to the next file. Financial transactions, all time-stamped, all traced to Vivian's biometric access. $2.3 million moved through 17 shell accounts. Very sophisticated. Almost impossible to trace. Almost. Board member Patricia Moore leaned forward. "Alexander, we had no idea." "Of course you didn't." "Because Marcus here," I gestured to my deputy, who'd gone rigid in my chair, "was very careful about who he recruited. 7 of you knew. The rest were kept in the dark to maintain plausible deniability." I displayed the project takeover file, complete with Marcus's handwritten notes. This is a detailed plan to remove me as CEO, manipulate my psychological evaluation, frame me for financial fraud, and install Marcus as my replacement. Phase 1, steal enough money to create suspicion. Phase 2, manufacture evidence of my instability. Phase 3, hostile takeover disguised as concerned leadership. The room erupted. Board members shouting denials, demanding explanations. Marcus stood frozen, his carefully constructed plan dissolving. Only Vivian remained silent, her eyes fixed on me with something that might have been respect or might have been hatred. I pulled up the final recording. Vivian's voice again, crystal clear, "You think I loved him? I loved what he could build. And now that it's built, I don't need the builder anymore." The room went silent. All eyes turned to her. "You said janitors are invisible," I said quietly. "You were wrong. We see everything. We hear everything. And we remember everything." Marcus made one last attempt. "You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Every conversation, every transaction, every lie. I've already forwarded copies to our legal team, the SEC, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." I finally sat down, not in my usual chair, Marcus still occupied that, but in the seat where I'd watched them plan my destruction. "So here's what happens next. Marcus, you're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Vivian, our lawyers will be in touch regarding divorce proceedings and criminal fraud charges. As for the rest of you..." I looked at the 7 green-marked board members. "You have 24 hours to resign. Do it quietly, and we'll call it professional differences. Fight me, and I'll bury you alongside them." Sometimes the story becomes about more than just what happened. It becomes about what we're willing to see, to acknowledge, to confront. If any part of this has made you pause, made you think about the invisible people in your own life, or the truths hiding in plain sight, then perhaps that's worth something. Perhaps that's worth sharing. But only if it moves you. Patricia signaled security. 2 officers entered, moving toward Marcus. "You can't do this," he said, his voice desperate now. "The board will. The board will do what I built this company to make them do. Follow the evidence, follow the truth, and follow my lead. That's what good governance looks like." Marcus was escorted out, still protesting. Vivian stood slowly, gathering her purse with remarkable composure. "For what it's worth," she said, "you really were brilliant. I underestimated you." "No," I replied. "You didn't know me at all. If you had, you'd have known I built this company by seeing what others missed. By paying attention to details. By never, ever underestimating people." She walked out without another word, her heels clicking against the marble floor. I turned to the remaining board members. "Meeting adjourned. We'll reconvene next week to discuss leadership structure. Until then, I suggest you all think very carefully about loyalty, integrity, and what this company actually stands for." They filed out in stunned silence, leaving me alone in the boardroom I'd built, in the chair I'd earned, surrounded by the wreckage of trust. I was still wearing Arthur's janitor uniform. Somehow, that felt appropriate. The FBI arrived at 7 p.m. I'd prepared a conference room with every piece of evidence meticulously organized: financial records, audio recordings, video footage, Marcus's project takeover file, even the wine bottle they'd stolen from my office, dusted for prints. Special Agent Sarah Martinez surveyed the materials with the expression of someone who'd just been handed a gift-wrapped case. "Mr. Cole, this is..." She paused, choosing her words. "This is the most thoroughly documented corporate fraud case I've seen in 15 years. I had time. And motivation. Her partner, Agent Rodriguez, was reviewing the transaction logs. The shell accounts route through the Caymans, Luxembourg, and Singapore. Sophisticated but traceable. You weren't kidding about the 2.3 million. That's just what I could confirm. I suspect there's more. I pulled up another file. These are offshore accounts Marcus mentioned in a conversation 3 nights ago. I haven't verified them, but his pattern suggests they're real. Martinez sat across from me, her notepad filling with details. Walk me through how you discovered this. From the beginning. I told her everything. Richard's initial warning, my decision to go undercover, the transformation into Arthur Hayes, the weeks of observation. She stopped me occasionally for clarification, her pen scratching notes. You realize this investigation will take months, she said finally. Maybe years. Financial fraud cases like this, involving multiple perpetrators, international accounts, potential money laundering, they're complex. I understand. Your wife will likely face 10 to 15 years if convicted on all counts. Marcus Reed could see 20. The board members who conspired with them will face their own charges. I felt nothing at the numbers. No satisfaction, no regret. Just exhaustion. What about the morality clause? I asked. In our prenuptial agreement. Does her criminal fraud trigger it? Martinez almost smiled. Mr. Cole, she's going to prison. The prenup is the least of her concerns. But she gets nothing. No settlement, no assets, nothing. That's a question for your attorneys. But generally speaking, fraud voids most marital contracts. She betrayed you criminally. Courts don't reward that. Rodriguez looked up from his laptop. We'll need your testimony, probably multiple depositions. You'll be the star witness. Whatever you need. They worked until midnight, photographing evidence, recording my statement, securing the files. When they finally left, the building felt enormous and empty. I rode the elevator down to the ground floor, still wearing Arthur's uniform. The night security guard, Carlos, a father of 3 who worked 2 jobs, nodded as I passed. Long night, Mr. Cole. Very long. If you don't mind me saying, sir, that's a good look on you. The uniform, I mean. Reminds us you're human. I stopped, looking at him properly. Carlos. I'm sorry if you've ever felt invisible here. If I've ever walked past without seeing you. He blinked, surprised. Sir. You matter. Your work matters. And I see you. I want you to know that. Thank you, sir. That means something. I walked out into the parking garage, breathing cool night air. My empire was intact, my enemies defeated, my company saved. But I'd lost my marriage. Lost my trust. Lost the illusion that success protected you from betrayal. The janitor's uniform felt heavy. I'd worn it to uncover the truth, to become invisible, to see the world from a different perspective. Now I couldn't unsee what I'd learned. I drove home to an empty house. Vivian's things were already gone, her lawyer had worked fast. The spaces where her belongings had been felt like accusations. In my study, I found a note on my desk. Her handwriting, still elegant. You won. I hope it was worth it. I crumpled the note and threw it away. Worth it? I'd saved my company. Protected my employees. Exposed corruption. Upheld justice. But I'd also spent 3 weeks learning that the people closest to me saw me as a mark. A target. A fool. I looked at Arthur's uniform, draped over my chair. The gray wig, the weathered boots, the tools of invisibility. Maybe I'd keep them. A reminder that the world looks different when you're not standing at the top. That perspective is earned through humility, not power. Maybe I'd keep them. A reminder that the world looks different when you're not standing at the top. That perspective is earned through humility. Maybe I'd keep them. A reminder that the world looks different when you're not standing at the top. That perspective is earned through humility, not power. And maybe, eventually, I'd learn to trust again. But not tonight. Tonight, I was just a man in a janitor's uniform, sitting in an empty house, wondering what came next. The trial lasted 9 months. I watched from the gallery as prosecutors dismantled Vivian and Marcus piece by piece. Every recording I'd made, every photograph, every transaction, all entered as evidence. Their defense attorneys tried to challenge the admissibility, claiming privacy violations, illegal surveillance, entrapment. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Cole used legally installed security systems in his own facility during business hours. There is no expectation of privacy in corporate spaces with disclosed monitoring. Motion denied. Vivian took the stand on day 43. She wore conservative gray, her hair pulled back, makeup minimal. Playing the victim now, the woman led astray by Marcus's manipulation. I loved Alexander, she testified, her voice breaking perfectly. Marcus took advantage of my trust. I never intended for any of this to happen. The prosecutor displayed the security footage again. Vivian's voice, clear and cold, you think I loved him? I loved what he could build. Does that sound like someone being manipulated, Mrs. Cole? She had no answer. Marcus's defense was simpler, deny everything. The recordings were edited. The documents were planted. Alexander Cole had orchestrated the entire scenario to frame them both. He's a tech genius, Marcus's attorney argued. He has the capability to fabricate any evidence he wants. This entire case is his revenge for a failing marriage. The prosecutor called Richard Chen to testify. Then Patricia Moore. Then 7 other board members who'd refused Marcus's recruitment. Each one confirmed the timeline, the suspicious activities, the conversation patterns that preceded my investigation. If Mr. Cole fabricated this evidence, the prosecutor asked, how did 12 witnesses independently corroborate events from before he went undercover? Marcus's attorney had no answer. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the courthouse hallway, watching people pass, lawyers, defendants, families. All of them carrying stories of betrayal, loss, seeking some version of justice. Richard found me in the afternoon. How are you holding up? I don't know. Ask me after the verdict. Alexander, regardless of what happens in there, you did the right thing. You protected the company. Protected everyone who depends on it. Did I? Sometimes I wonder if I should have just confronted them. Had it out privately. Ended it without all this. I gestured at the courthouse around us. They stole from you. They planned to destroy you. You had every right to defend yourself. The bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. Jury's back. The verdict came quickly. Guilty on all counts. Vivian, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. 15 years. Marcus, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, securities violations. 23 years. Vivian's face crumbled when the judge read the sentence. Marcus stood rigid, expressionless, already planning appeals that would never succeed. I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just a hollow certainty that everyone had lost something. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I'd avoided press throughout the trial, letting the evidence speak. Now they wanted reactions, sound bites, dramatic quotes. "Mr. Cole, how do you feel about your wife's sentence? Mr. Cole, will you comment on the verdict? Mr. Cole, what's next for Cole Tech?" I stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, looking at the cameras, the microphones, the hungry faces. "Justice was served," I said simply. "That's all that matters." I walked to my car alone. No celebration, no victory parade. Just a man who'd won everything and felt like he'd lost. The company thrived. Stock prices rose. Employee confidence returned. I'd saved the empire. But the cost of that salvation sat heavy in my chest, a weight I'd carry long after the trial ended. 5 years later, I stood in a community center in East Houston, watching teenagers learn to code. The Alexander Cole Foundation had started small, a few scholarships, some mentorship programs. Now it operated in 12 cities, offering free technical education to kids who'd never have access otherwise. "Mr. Cole." A young woman approached, laptop in hand. "Can you look at my algorithm? It's not compiling right." "Show me." Her name was Maria. 17, brilliant, taught herself Python from YouTube videos. She reminded me of myself at that age, hungry to learn, desperate to prove herself. "See here." I pointed at her screen. "You're close. But this loop needs to break under different conditions." Her face lit up. "Oh. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks." She hurried back to her workstation, already fixing the code. I watched her work, remembering when programming felt like magic. Before it became business. Before it became a weapon used against me. "You're good with them." I turned. Sarah Chin stood behind me, no relation to Richard, despite the shared last name. She ran the foundation's Houston branch, a former teacher who'd pivoted to nonprofit work after her school district cut all computer science programs. "They remind me why I started coding," I said. "Before the money, before the company. When it was just about solving problems. That's why you're here 3 times a week instead of running your empire." I have good people running the empire now. And honestly, this feels more important. Sarah smiled. "Want to grab coffee? There's something I wanted to discuss about the scholarship expansion." We walked to the cafe across the street. Over the years, these coffee meetings had evolved from professional to friendly to something more. Sarah saw me as Alexander, not Alexander Cole the billionaire. She'd never asked about Vivian, never Googled my net worth, never treated me differently than any other foundation donor. It was refreshing. Terrifying. Real. "So," she said, settling into her chair. "The board approved funding for the satellite program. 20 new locations over 2 years. That's incredible. It's because of you. Your testimony at the funding hearing moved them. It's because of you. Your program design made the case." She laughed. "Can we agree we're both essential?" "Deal." We talked for an hour about expansion plans, curriculum development, teacher training. The kind of problems that felt meaningful. That actually changed lives. As we stood to leave, Sarah hesitated. "This might be completely inappropriate, but there's a gallery opening tomorrow night. Contemporary photography. I thought, if you're not busy, maybe you'd want to go." 5 years ago, I would have analyzed every angle. Looked for hidden motives. Suspected betrayal. Now I just smiled. "I'd like that." "Really? Really? What time?" We made plans. She walked back toward the community center, and I stood on the sidewalk, watching the Houston traffic, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a man trying to save his company. Not the grim hope of a man seeking justice. Just simple, quiet hope that maybe there were still people in the world worth trusting. My phone buzzed. Richard, board meeting moved to Thursday. Hope that works. I typed back, perfect. See you then. Cold tech still consumed parts of my life. I still attended board meetings, approved major decisions, guided the company's direction. But it wasn't everything anymore. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, mopping floors in my own building, discovering that the throne I'd built was just furniture. What mattered wasn't the empire, it was what you built the empire for. I thought about Arthur Hayes sometimes. The invisible man who'd seen everything. In a strange way, I missed him. Missed the clarity that came from being no one. The perspective earned through humility. I still kept the uniform, actually. In a closet at home, cleaned and pressed. A reminder of the weeks I'd spent learning that power without wisdom was just expensive weakness. The years since the trial had been quiet. Vivian remained in federal prison, her appeals exhausted. Marcus had aged decades behind bars, his confidence dissolved into bitter resignation. The board members who'd conspired with them had scattered, some to other industries, others to retirement, all carrying the stain of betrayal. I'd rebuilt. Not just the company, but myself. Learned to trust carefully, to see people clearly, to value character over charisma. And maybe, just maybe, I'd learned that the real treasure wasn't the billion-dollar empire. It was the relationships you built with honesty. The lives you touched with generosity. The person you became when no one was watching. If you've stayed with me through all of this, through the betrayal, the investigation, the trial, the rebuilding, then thank you. Stories like these matter because they remind us that survival isn't about winning. It's about learning. Growing. Becoming someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. Someone who could recognize real treasure when it finally appeared. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, looking forward to tomorrow. I typed back, me too. Tomorrow. A gallery opening. Coffee conversations. Code reviews with teenagers who reminded me why I'd started this journey. The empire stood strong, built on firmer foundations than before. But my life had become something larger than the business I'd built. I'd become the kind of man who could wear a janitor's uniform and learn from it. Who could lose everything and rebuild something better. Who could trust again, carefully and wisely, with eyes wide open. Alexander Cole had gone undercover in his own company and uncovered his wife's dark secret. But in the process, he discovered something more valuable, himself. And that, finally, felt like enough. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next